Hello, I am petroonishchuk. In this video, I want to create simple HTTP server by using Go language for receive GET request and also POST request. And then I'll be using this HTTP server with my iOS project. First, we must create our project. For create our project, I will be using Visual Studio Code. And then I will create a first file. First file will be Go mod file. We create this file for two goals. First, for work with third-party dependencies. But in this example, we don't work with third-party dependencies. And also, we can create this file for simply run our project without typing name of file what we want to run. For example, and now you can see we start our project. And also, how you can see, I create our file, Go mod file. And then, when we work with third-party dependency, our third-party dependency will be displayed in this file. But in this video, we don't work with third-party dependencies. How I said previously, I create this file for simply run our project without typing name of our file. Okay, this is our Go mod file. Next, I want to create two new files. First file, main.go file. Main.go file will be main file in our project. And also, I want to create get user go file. Get user go file will be hold model and data for work with GET request in our project. For example, and now, how you can see, we have a two file. First, main.go file. This is our main file. And how you can see, we have our main function. Through this function, will be run our project. Now it's empty. And also, we have our get user go file. So this file, we have our model, get user structure. How you can see, our structure have couple property, ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar. And also, we have a key for JSON data, for encoder and decoder data for work with JSON format. And also, how you can see, we have variables get user. These variables hold slice of get user object. Inside our slice of get user object, we have a six object. First object I create, for example, with name of each property. But we can also create each object without typing a name of each property. Slice in Go language like array in Swift language. Okay, this is our model and also this is our data. Next, I want to create a new file for work with our GET request and also in future for work with our POST request. For example, And now, how you can see, I create a new file, server-user.go. Inside this file, we have one function. Name of this function, handle user request. This function takes two parameters. First parameter, HTTP responsive writer. With this parameter, we will send our value to our iOS device. And also, we have our HTTP request. With these parameters, we will check what request we have, GET request or POST request. And then, how you can see, I create two variants for work with our GET request. These two variants for check if we have query item. Let's see first variant. This is our first variant. In first variant, we check if our query item have key page, and then if our key page have value 2. If we have value 2, that means all okay. And then we try to encode our data, what holds our getUser variables inside our getUser.go file. How you can see, we take this variable with this object. And then when we encode our data, we send this data by using our HTTP responsive writer. And we send this data to our iOS device. And if we have an error, we check and send an error. This is our first variant. We also have a second variant. With second variant, we check if we have query item. And then we check if we have query item key with value page. If we have value page, and then we check if our key page have value 2. If we have value 2, that means all okay. And then we encode our data, what hold our getUser variable, and then we send this data to our iOS device by using our responsive write. And also we check an error. If we have an error, we send an error. This is our two variants, but we must use only one variant. This video I will be using variant number 2. That means first variant I must commit. Okay, I will write code for work with GET request. And then I want to write code for work with POST request. For this, first I must create a new file, postuser.go. Inside this file, I will have a model and also I will have a data for our POST request. And also then I will fill code inside our case post. For example, and now let's see what I create. First, how you can see, I create file postuser.go. Inside this file, we have our model and also we have our data. First, we have structure user form. This structure we will be using for decoded data, what will be sent by using our iOS device for create our GET request. And also, we have a structure post user structure. With this structure, we will create post user object, and then we will be send this post user object to our iOS device when we will be create our GET request. And also, how you can see, we have variables post user. This variable holds lines post user object. How you can see, we have 5 post user objects. And then with our iOS device, we will make our post request and search for specific post user object. If we found our specific post user object, we will take this specific post user object and set by using our HTTP server. Next, inside our server user.go, in our handler user request for post request case, we add some code for work with our post request. First, we set content type for our responsive writer, and also we create a variable user. This variable will be called a user, what we try to find inside our post user variable. In our post user Go file, we try to find in our data post user variables. Next, in our iOS device, we'll be make our post request and we'll be set our HTTP body with value what we try to find. And then in our HTTP server, we take this data, what called our request HTTP body, and try to decode this data and set to our user property. And if we have an error, we return an error. Next, by using our foundUser method, we try to find user what called our user property. How we said previously, this property holds value what we set by using our iOS device inside our request HTTP body. And then how you can see our foundUser function take two parameters. First parameter is user what we try to find. Second parameter is slice of post-user object will hold our post-user property inside our post-user.go file. That means will be found a user inside the slice of post-user object. And then inside this method, we go through value what hold our post-user variable and check if our value have the same name and also have the same job value what hold our user what we try to find. And then if we found user what matches, we return this user, and also for error we return nil. And if we don't find this user, we return post-user object for placeholder, and also we return an error with value what we can find. This is our function foundUser. And then if we successfully found our user will be held in our new form user. And next, when we don't find our user in our post-user variables, we have an error. And then we check. If we have an error, we return error with value what we can find. But if we successfully found our user will be in our new form user property. And then we using this new form user property for encode this property with value what hold this property and send this property by using responsive writer to our iOS device. We use JSON new encoder writer and encoded data will hold our new form user. And if our encoder is not successful, this means we have an error and we return an error with value of our error. Okay, this is code for work with our post request in our HTTP server. Next, move to our main.go file. This is our main.go file. Inside our main.go file, we have our main function with name main. Inside the main function, first we using our http.handle function. This function takes two parameters. First parameter is in end of our URL. This is end of our URL will be in our iOS device, where we will be make our GET request and also where we will make our POST request. And also we have a function handle user request. This function we hold in our server user.go file. We'll be run this function for work with our GET request and also for work with our POST request. Next, how you can see, we try to run our server by using http listen server, and we take a parameter for value for our server. In my example, I put value 5000. This means our local host will be have value 5000, and we try to run our server. And if we have an error, we print an error. And when we don't have an error, this means we run our server successfully. Okay, this is our simple HTTP server for work with GET request and also for work with POST request. And then for show you how work our HTTP server, we must run our HTTP server and also we must run our iOS application. And then through iOS application, make our GET request and also make our POST request and show you how work our HTTP server with our iOS device. And now you can see on the right side we have our local server. I create local server by using Go language. First is our main.go file. Inside our main.go file we have our main function. Through this function we will run our local server. First, how you can see, for make our GET request we must have on the end of our URL /users. How you can see, this is our URL. End of our URL users. And when we make our URL, we must run our function handle user request. This function we place it inside our server user.go file. And also for run our server, I take value 5000. And now when we move to our Xcode project, for our local server we have value 5000. That means our URL is correct. And also when we create our URL we add our query item with name page and value 2. And now we move to our handler user request method. This method checks what method we have, get request or post request. In this example, we have a get request. And when we have a get request, we check our query item. If we have key page with value 2, this means our get request is correctly. And then if our get request is correctly, we must set value to our iOS device. And now I try to show you what data we want to send. We want to send data what hold property getUser. How you can see, inside file getuser.go we have property getUser. This property holds slice of getUser object. We'll take this data, convert this data to JSON data and send to our iOS device. And then in our iOS device we decode this data and convert to our array of user objects. How you can see, this data holds email, first name, last name, and avatar. And also, this is our model for getUsers. And when we decode our data, our ID starts from the lowercase email, first name will be have value first name, last name, and avatar from the lowercase. And now you can see, we try to encode this data, and by using our responsive writer, send this data to our iOS device. If we have an error, we return an error. And now I try to run our server and make our GET request by using our iOS device and also our local server. For example, now we run our application and we run our server by using go run and dot. In this example, how you can see, we run our main file without typing name of our main file, because we create our common file. Common file we can use it for work with third-party dependency and also for simply run our application. Okay, we run our simulator, and now we move to our user get request with localhost. And now we have a two buttons. First button for make our get request. And then when we tap to this button, we must make our get request and display this data in our application. When we tap to this button, we must request data will hold our get user variables. How you can see, when we tap to this button, we download this data. We have first name, last name, ID, we download each image for our user. This means our iOS application works correctly, and also our local server works correctly. Link to video where I create this iOS project I put below in description. On the left side we have our iOS project. On the right side we have our local server. I create local server by using call language. And now for run our local server we must type in go run and dot. Path of our server must have value 5000. When we make our post request with our local server, our path have value 5000. This URL must be correct. And now let's see what data we must receive when we make our post request with this local server. Let's move to our post user code. This file holds our model and also this file holds our data. First we have our structure user form. This structure holds two properties, job and name. I create very similar structure for make our post request like in our previously IP. We must make request with name and job. And also we create our post user structure. This user will be called name, job, ID and create this data similar like our previously IP. And also, how you can see, we have a property post user. This property holds slice of post user object. And then we will search a specific post user object from our slice of user object and take this object and send to our iOS device. That means we will search our specific user by name and by job. We have different name and different job. Ron, manager, Eric, developer. And we try to make a post request by take value for Erica, for example, with job developer. And now let's move to our server user.go. Inside this file we have our handler user request. This function will be work with our post request. How you can see, the server can take a get request and also we can take a post request. In this video I will make a post request. And when we take a post request, we try to decode our data, what we receive from our iOS device. We will decode our data to our user form with name and job value. And if our decoder is successful, we run our method foundUser to found a specific user what we receive from our iOS device, and we try to find this user in our POST slice. If we have an error, we return an error. And if we don't have an error and found our specific user, we try to encode this specific user and send this specific user to our iOS device to display this user in our iOS application. If we have an error, we send an error. This is our method for found specific PostUser object in our PostUser slice. We'll hold our file postuser.go. Will be found our user inside PostUser slice. And this is our main file. And when we run our Go application, we run this file. How you can see, for work with our request, we select our handle user function for hold inside our server user.go. How you can see, we set this function for work with our request. And also, this is value from our server. And how you can see, I run this server. And now I run our iOS device. I try to make a post request with different user for hold our local server. For example, this is our main content view. Now move to our view for work with local server. Our view is very similar like we work with our IP. We have name, job ID, and create date, and also the text field section. And now I try to make our post request with our user, Morpheus, and leader. How you can see, this is our first user in our post user slide. And when we make post request with this user, we must display ID for this user and for this date for this user. For example, how you can see, we display name, job leader, ID 128, and this date. This means our method works correctly. Let's try to another user. For example, Mary, developer. When we try to make our post request with value Mary and job developer, we take this data, Mary, developer, ID, and date create. How you can see, this is this date. This means our post request works correctly. Let's try to another user. Erica, developer. How you can see, when we make our post request with Erica, developer, we take this data, Erica, developer, ID 123, and date create. How you can see, there's the same value. That means our post request worked correctly. This is the end of my video. In this video, I try to show you how you can create your local server by using Go language, and also how you can use your local server with iOS project. This is the end. Thank you for watching.